Hi, my name is Josh Apter. I'm the founder of Manhattan Edit Workshop. I wanted to welcome you to episode 2, second installment of Sight, Sound, and Story Live, where we're bringing artists in the field of editing and cinematography together to talk about the art and the technique and the technology of filmmaking. So this is our second event of its kind. We used to usually have live events. That not being the reality that we're in right now, we're going to be doing more regular events brought to you right here online. And it's still it seems to be a very rich experience. Our last one was a mentorship seminar about editors. It still felt very personal. And I think people really enjoyed it. So we're really excited to get back into it. And I think as educators, sometimes we get caught up in looking at the technology and the hardware and what button does this and shortcuts and things like that. But it's always nice to talk about the art and and the creative decisions. And I love that we take time to just go into that world for a while. And it's great to do it when we're talking about editing. It's great to do it when we talk about cinematography. So today's event is actually I really can't wait to hear what John and Snehal have to say. I'm going to introduce them in a minute and then get out of the way for the rest of the event here. But I did want to thank our sponsors, Snehal, Katya, and Tony, all from ZEISS. We really couldn't do it without you. Our other sponsors, OWC and Shutterstock. Of course, I have to thank Manhattan Edit Workshop personnel, Jason Banky, who's sitting 6 feet or more away from me, making all of this happen so seamlessly. So if it all goes right, it's because of him. And if it all goes wrong, it's because of me. I also want to thank Janet Dalton and Tristan Ledwidge, who are at Central Command, making sure everything stays audible and visible to you guys at home. So what we'll do now, before I introduce Snehal and John, is we're going to watch a short video from ZEISS, our sponsor for tonight. And when we come back, like I said, we'll do less talking. I'll let them do more talking. So let's take a look at the video from ZEISS right now. All right, we're back. And before I flip it over to our guests, I did want to make a mention of another behind the scenes magician who really helps make these things work out. I know you're watching Mike Valinsky. He does a lot of hard work and he does it for very little thanks. And I think he should be recognized for talking to everybody and helping produce and coordinate all the different people that go in to make events like this happen. So thanks, Mike. I hope you enjoy the show too. So now I'm going to introduce our panelist from, moderator from ZEISS, Snehal Patel, who's going to turn his video on, and John Simmons, ASC. And before you guys get going, I was glad to meet you and talk to you briefly. Can't wait to hear what you have to say about cinematography, photography, mentorship, all these great things about art that I think, it's great to spend some time to focus on. So I'll excuse myself and I'll let you guys take it away. Have a great event.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
And I want to echo what he just said about Mike Valinsky. I want to thank him again because he's right. Mike doesn't get thanked enough. He does a lot for the community and really helps bring everyone together. And it's because of him that we get to have this event today with Johnny Simmons, my friend from the ASC. John, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing really well. And yeah, Mike, thank you very much.
Johnny,
Okay.
I want you to tell me about how you started in the industry, and then we'll get into like the photography aspect of it, because of course you did that first, as a professional before becoming a professional cinematographer. But tell us how you got started. How did you get started in the industry, and what was your like first big?
Well, basically, that's how I got started. When I was in undergraduate school at Fisk University, I had a mentor. His name was Carlton Moss. He was a film director and historian. Interesting guy. He used to work with W.B. Du Bois, was Paul Robeson's road manager and Lena Horne's road manager. And he used to come down to Fisk University and do a series called The Image of the Black Man in American Cinema. And he also was part of the Why We Fight series that Capra did. He made a film called The Negro Soldier about Black soldiers behind the enemy lines of World War II. Well, Carlton one day looked at my photographs and said that I was a cinematographer. I didn't even know what that was. And he began, I didn't know what, I had never heard that word before. So he began to send me American Cinematographer magazines, and, I fell in love with it. And he comes down there and shoots an industrial film. And I was doing the slate and learning how to do camera reports. And I looked through the viewfinder of this Eclair camera, and suddenly that shutter flickering past the viewfinder, which people don't really get to experience anymore unless they're shooting film, right? And I just fell in love with it. And to be able to pan that camera and make a continuous composition and the idea of telling a story, that was exactly the day that everything started. And I got a little internship out here in Los Angeles, and I got a scholarship to USC Film School. And after I got out of school, I didn't really feel like I knew very much. And I got a job at a rental house. It was called F&B Seco. They don't exist anymore. There was one in New York, and there was one in Los Angeles. And while at F&B Seco, I got, one very important thing. I started to shoot documentaries for Carlton, little short narrative, biographical, African-American historical documentaries. But still, I just needed to know more about what I was doing. So I got a job at F&B Seco and became a camera technician for 2 years. And from that job, I shot a spot for the Social Security Administration. They called and they were looking for someone that could shoot a sunrise, a time-lapse sunrise, and a time-lapse sunset. The sunrise was in Maine. The sunset was behind the Golden Gate Bridge. Well, I didn't know anything about working an intervalometer, but I said I did, because the job wasn't for about a month. So I practiced and practiced. The manager let me take the intervalometer home, and I finally got it together and got that job. And it lasted forever because the sun doesn't set behind the Golden Gate Bridge because there's always fog, right? And it doesn't rise off the coast of Maine because there's always fog. So all I did every day was set it up, started in the middle of the woods, and it would never happen. So I have to say that that was probably my first commercial gig. And from there, I met a director that took me into music videos, and I started doing music videos as my first real recognized kind of work. And I did hundreds of music videos. I mean, anybody that ever got in trouble in the rap game, I did their videos,
Well, okay, yeah, let's talk about that. Who is your favorite troublemaking rap guy or woman?
Well, actually, he wasn't much of a troublemaker. He was only presented himself as a troublemaker. I used to love making music videos for Ice Cube because he knew how to tell a story.
Ice Cube, I work with him too. He does act hard, but he's just really like a cool guy.
He knows how to tell a story. And then I did another one called What's My Name with Snoop Dogg, where they turn into dogs. And I have to say that was my favorite video of all time. I did lots of them, man. Britney Spears.
Oh, that was the morphing where the dogs were
together.
together.
It was the morphing. Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. And whenever there's a documentary on rap videos, I see a lot of my videos. They always start off with this one called Rump Shaker.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I remember that track. So, you know, this was back in the day when
Oh my God, was it back in the
your
day?
videos would actually go to MTV. So, you know,
Yeah, and they
and
had budgets.
they had budgets, right? Exactly. And I think it was really important at that time because, you know, there was a lot of pushback from MTV against rap for like the longest time.
Right.
Right? And I mean, people ask like, well, why was BET created? I'll tell you why BET created is because MTV did not want black music on the channel.
No, absolutely.
And you can go back and watch YouTube, videos of hosts saying this, on camera.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, or you know, when David Bowie called him out on it, that's on. You can go listen to that interview. Go listen to David Bowie call out MTV because this was real. And so then when you got into the game and you're talking about this cadre of rappers, this is one of the first times, like with Snoop Dogg and Ice Cube. This was the generation that was first, right? Like to actually get
Totally.
on a
But it
national.
wasn't the best marriage because now entertainers understand the relationship of cinema and music. At that time, it was always an educational process because I'd get with a director and we'd sit down and we'd do a lookbook and we would watch commercials and films and decide on a look, and this video was going to change our lives. We were going to do big commercials after we finished this video. And
Yeah.
then what would happen is, for example, my first video was Stevie Wonder. I was Ribbons in the Sky, and I did it with another cinematographer, Walter. I can't remember his last name. But that video, Stevie was supposed to be there at 7 o'clock. He comes at 1 in the morning, and so many rappers would like show up and say, that was a great idea you guys had, but what I really want to do is I just want some cars to bounce in the background and I'm gonna stand in the front. Maybe we get some girls to dance on the hood or something like that, right? After we had, put this amazing video together that was gonna like win all kinds of MTV awards. So I went from there to commercials, and from commercials to movies of the week and things like that.
Yeah, and then more recently, we were talking about before, the session that you in 2016 you got nominated for an Emmy award for a children's program, right?
I won an Emmy. I won that Emmy. Actually, I got 3 nominations for children's shows, primetime children TV shows, and it's always a surprise because children's shows don't usually get that kind of attention. And I won for a show called Nicky, Ricky, Dicky, and Don. It was on Nickelodeon, and that was the first time a kids show had ever won a primetime Emmy for multi-camera cinematography.
That's great.
It was a pretty good opportunity, and I'm nominated right now for a show called Family Reunion, which I think we have a clip of. You'll show it later, right?
Oh, cool. Yeah. In fact, we could play that in the background while we're chatting. How's that?
That'll work.
Let me get that queued up. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was like the difference between, you've done everything when it comes to like what's it called? Single camera work, documentary style, fiction, everything. And then multicam, and you won an Emmy award for it. So for you, generally speaking, is there a big difference in terms of the way you work, in terms of lighting, camera work, when you're doing a multicam show versus single cam show?
Yeah, it's very different. The one thing about multicam is that it's dialogue driven. This clip that we're about to watch is an exception to the rule because this is a story about the history of a family, and the family is dealing with the tradition of weddings and marriage and the rituals that go on within the Black community. And this scene right here is a story of this one character, her, and she falls in love with the manager of the nightclub, who's a white guy, which wasn't very much acceptable at that time. There he is right there. And then it goes on, and there's the grandmother. She's going to tell the story. You'll see it in a minute. And this is supposed to be like the Cotton Club. And normally the shooting for 4 cameras presents a challenge because you're always trying to establish a ratio and as much as possible make it look like single camera, and to be able to have some kind of visual texture to the scene. and also not for it to be bright like the traditional sitcoms have always been lit. This one kind of works well because of all the environments are isolated by different lights and there's a lot of flagging going on. The other thing about multi-camera work is it's always upstage keys. So everybody is lit from upstage as their key light, and the fill is in the front. Not many times are you doing that. And the reason why is because we have preambulators and the booms come in and it limits the amount of boom shadows. So we're always fighting against that. So to be able to create a look with a dark side and a bright side for all four cameras is always a challenge. And a lot of that depends on what the art directors give us to work with.
Right.
And in this
So you
case,
use the art direction to kind of hide equipment and stuff like that too.
well,
And
it's nice to be able to have a conversation with your art director so you can actually define some sources. Like this scene in the bedroom is pretty much a little more traditional in the sitcom approach. It's daytime and the ambience, of course, wouldn't really be coming from the front side like it is, but you try to create some kind of ratio that makes it feel acceptable. You know what I mean?
yeah, absolutely. As if it bounced off of a wall and lit them.
Yeah, you know, and that's always a challenge to make that work.
Yeah.
And you're
Absolutely.
always up against the clock on these things, because they're shot in 2 days. So
Right.
this scene right here in the Country Western Club is shot on the same day that we do the Cotton Club. Oh man, I thought I turned my phone off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same day that we shot the Cotton Club. So you're always moving fast, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, you got to kind of like deal with it and then kind of move on quickly and
Exactly.
get what you can. Of course, you got the four camera angles, so you're lighting for all four cameras at a time. And that's got to be way more complicated than trying to light for one camera system.
I'll tell you, it's the most difficult thing I've ever done. And to be able to grow in this field has actually made me be able to shoot narrative things just a little better. I have a better understanding of, you know,
Hmm.
how raps work and things like that.
Yeah, sure.
And, you know, it's really good too. I had this director is named Eric Dean Seaton, who has a taste and a love for cinematography. So he likes to go a little bit further than just telling the story, because a lot of sitcoms are totally motivated by dialogue. If you're not saying something, you're not on the screen, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And you still get maintaining a cinematic look. You got the shallower depth of field that you would expect on a multicam show. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, you know, here's the thing that happens is, as cinematographers, all of us, no matter what the assignment is, we try the best we can to press the edges of the envelope, you know, even if it's an interview. If you're going to do a talking head, you just don't want to do a talking head. You want to be able to expand that as much as you can. So in the narrative world, when you sit down and your cinematography is at the top of the list, along with the acting and the writing,
Right.
that's a different relationship. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
when you're working in a TV factory,
Mhm.
the challenge is to be able to do that in spite of the time and in spite of the restrictions. How do you make it feel like those things didn't exist? You know, that we're actually pushing that envelope and bulging the frame as much as you possibly can when people are saying, "Are you ready yet?" You know?
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. We're gonna also play in the background a great video that you use for educational purposes to
Oh,
kind of
let me
demonstrate your. Go ahead.
let me talk about that, because
Yes,
what he's about to play is he's about to play this little lighting demo that I did. And I
that's right.
didn't really do the lighting demo. Um, I Everything that's in the lighting demo is post. I mean, I was working on a demo reel with an editor, and there was a book about Caravaggio on the table. And we were looking at this pilot that I did. And I looked at a scene in the courtroom, and I was looking at, this is really taking a broad step to say, I was looking at a painting by Caravaggio and comparing it to my pilot. But nonetheless, I was. And what happens here is it's about being influenced by images that have affected you. that you don't even realize that you're doing. Because when I was teaching at UCLA, I would take everybody to the art museum. So this is the shot I was looking at when I told my editor, I said, hey man, this looks like the coming of David, which is, I mean, that's quite a comparison, but not really. And it's just an unconscious influence. And that's why, as an artist, I've always enjoyed going to the art museum before I take on an assignment, and I would take my students there because it's like a nutritional experience. It's like something that you take inside of yourself and you digest it. And as you digest it, it becomes a part of you. And suddenly you're like using that and you're exploring that in the work that you're about to do. And we've all been affected by iconic images and throughout history. It's like, and suddenly as we interpret scenes, we're affected by those influences. This is another Caravaggio experience that I just lit. And later on, I was looking at a Caravaggio painting and it looked like this. Even the light on the shadow in Felicia's face feels like the shadow in the Caravaggio painting. And I wasn't looking at the painting when I did the scene, but it seemed appropriate for the story,
Mm-hmm. And I think that this is really important for people that are learning cinematography to understand, is that you take real life and what you see in real life, and then you create, you literally are painting with your sensor, camera, lens, everything, the scene and the lighting, because the camera can't see the way human eye can see, but that limitation actually allows for you to be creative. And that's actually what they do with the painting on canvas. The canvas is also a limitation, right? And
Yeah.
the kind of colors that you can use on that canvas all at once is a limitation. So
Well,
the best painters in the world, they were able to represent reality within this limitation.
it's an interesting thing because you can imagine painting something in the 17th, 16th century. There's no art supply store. There's nothing. You build everything. You go to the shipping place to a ship star to get canvas. You make paint, and you make oil. By the time you put an image together, there's a plot to it. There's a subtext. There's no accidents. Everything within that frame. When you touch a brush, which you've made from your horse's tail or your girlfriend's hair, to a blank canvas, there's decisions and subtext and things that exist outside that frame that you'll never see, but influence what's in the frame, And that's always been very interesting to me. And I also like the idea of going back to early images, paintings as a source, not so much imitating what we see on Netflix, which isn't, people do that, but just to be able to see where that style comes from. When I was teaching at UCLA, we did a demo reel of the cinematography students it was like in the early 2000s. And I come home and I'm like, these reels are amazing. They look like mature cinematographers. And then the following week, I go back to school and I see a woman on the floor and she's got LA Confidential locked in her laptop. And another woman is lifting a 5K in the back of the room, stretching the shadows that are coming through the window. I was like, okay, that's how they do it, right? but what she didn't know was that Spinati had created a Caravaggio look, right? And just to be able to go back to the tradition of lighting, when you look at, say, what we're looking at now, Hopper, and you think about Chinatown, right?
Yeah, and then in Hopper, he used colors to make it pop. And here you're doing that. You're separating the characters from their foreground and background, but yet not lighting them flat. There's little pools of light that fall, and it actually tells you what's going on stuff off screen. It's telling you the shape of the window, maybe the wood beams that are on the window or bars or anything like that. You're kind of seeing in a subtle way.
Yeah, and it just when you study paintings as a reference, it shows you the magic of a shadow. and how it directs your attention to the light.
Yeah,
It also creates the mystery. The shadow becomes the mystery of what's hiding in that shadow. And, you know, it's just a very powerful tool for any artist to study, you know, not just cinematographers.
Absolutely. Let's talk about another influence that you had, because before you were a cinematographer, we of course picked up the story about when you first got introduced to cinematography, but you had a pretty decent career for a while as a photographer, working for local newspapers as well. So do you mind giving us a little bit of a rundown on how that got started? Because I know you started in your teens with still photography, and then what
Yeah,
into your 20s.
you know, I mean, you know, what's really interesting is all these things that have developed have been the result of a certain kind of mentorship, which we'll probably talk about later. But there was a friend of mine, his name was Louis Singstack. His family owned the oldest Black publication in the country, which is the Chicago Defender newspaper, Chicago Daily Defender newspaper, established in 1906. It's a Black newspaper. It was like, you know, a seriously significant publication for Black people. And Pullman porters on the train used to take it down south and distribute it to people. And it was like you could get lynched or put in jail if you got caught with a Defender. It's a powerful newspaper. Wow. Bobby Singstack was a photographer and my best friend's brother. And I thought he was one of the hippest cats in the world because he was like draped with Nikons, and, you know, and spent time in the dark room, and there was jazz playing, and we all looked up to him. And I used to love the magic of watching the photographs come out of the chemicals.
Yeah.
So we went to a convention in New York, and I said to Bobby, I'd like to use your camera. And I shot some pictures with the camera. He processed them. And he said the same thing Carlton said. He said, you got an eye, right? I said, okay, right? And he gave me a book called The Sweet Flypaper of Life by Langston Hughes with photographs by Roy DeCarava. And it's a story of the day in the life of a Black family in Harlem. And the photographs are candid street photographs of Harlem, New York in the 50s. And I just connected to that. I knew that that was something that I could do. And Bobby helped me do that. So within a very short time, I was 15 years old, I guess, when that first started. And by 16, I was working in the lab in the Chicago Defender. And in that same year, I was covering stories for the Chicago Defender. And because of the time period being 1968, there was a lot going on. I mean, you know, there was anti-war protests for Vietnam. There were civil rights activities going on. There were hippies and all kinds of hip poets. I mean, there couldn't have been a more passionate period. It's almost kind of reflects the times that we are in today.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was able to, like, you know, look through that camera and tell the story of my community and the things that we were dealing with. And Bobby also introduced me to other very significant influences, like Henry Cartier-Bresson and Gordon Parks and, you know, Dorothea Lange and all these photographers that have shaped my way of seeing and photographing. And something just happened. I'm going to brag a little bit because the Getty is doing something on protest photography, and they've got a couple of my pictures going in, and I'm going to be hanging on the wall next to Dorothea Lange and Robert Frank. And I mean, it's a big deal for me to have accomplished that because, you know, the thing about taking still pictures, different from motion pictures, is that when we create something as cinematographers, we're trying to visualize a narrative. And it requires a lot of people to do that, and a lot of equipment, time, money, a lot of stuff. When I take pictures with my still camera, I just walk out there and it's me. It's the things that I see. It's how I see. And there's a certain freedom there. And I've always loved that. I mean, I still carry a camera every day.
That's amazing. Well, we're going to share some of these photographs with people, with folk.
Okay.
It starts off with some of your older work, and then I think it goes into some of the more recent stuff. So let's take a look, and then what I want to do is let's discuss. You know, each image that we see, let's let you say a few things about what was going on and what it meant to you.
Oh, there's
Um,
something right there.
uh-huh.
Everything I've done that has shaped my life comes together and shapes my vision. It fills the frame when I press the shutter or touch a brush to paper. It sums up the totality of who I am at that moment. Then the image takes on a life of its own. You know, that's like a real true thing. Everything that we do as artists culminates at the moment we become creative. You know, all of our experiences are depicted in that moment. And it's just so interesting to live that and to live that in present time. You know, it's like suddenly your artwork becomes a verb. You know, it's an action picture. This picture was taken in Macomb, Georgia in 1969.
While
I
you were
was
still working at the Chicago Defender.
I was in undergraduate school in Nashville, Tennessee, and got an assignment to go down to Macomb, Georgia. A little girl had walked into a grocery store, a little black girl, and the store owner told her to hurry up. And she said, "Wait a minute." And he slapped her and pushed her out the store. Her mother goes to the same store to have a conversation with the man, and she winds up in the same situation. He slaps her and pushes her out the store. So all the black people in the community boycotted downtown. And that's why we went down there to cover the story. Now, if you look closely at this picture, the policeman with the helmet on the right is a policeman. The guy with the state trooper helmet, he has a billy club in his hand. You can see it, you know, at the bottom left corner. Behind the guy is a man in a baseball helmet, right? And that guy is a deputized truck driver. They went to the truck stop and deputized truck drivers to control the crowd. Shortly after I took this picture, one of those police hit me across my back with a billy club. I fell to the ground and I opened my eyes and he said, "Whatever you do," and he uses the N word, "don't let the sun set on you. Not while I'm in this town." And I listened to him, I didn't.
As a young undergraduate, I'm glad that you listened to him
We moved on.
and moved on. Yeah,
These
absolutely.
photographs are a collection of photographs that were put together for LA Photo, that annual exhibit that happens in Los Angeles. This year it was virtual. And the Getty Museum put a number of photographers, actually 3 photographers together, that did protest work. And the interesting thing about my work is that my whole vision is shaped by protest. 1965 was the year I first picked up a camera. It was also the first year that Black people were given the right to vote. So prior to that, all my life, I was fed by an attitude of protest and a vision in photography that subtly is influenced by that experience. This is Angela Davis. And I like this photograph because, you know, she's just having a moment there. I have photographs of Angela making very powerful speeches with her hands in the air and gesturing, but this one's just a little bit, we look on the inside and get to feel a different kind of Angela Davis. She's having a moment there. I gave her that picture and I dated it 1971, which is, I have to change that date because when I gave her the picture, she says, "This date is wrong. I was in prison in 1971.
You have to check your facts, Johnny.
Gotta check my facts, right?
I wanted to mention that you talked about 1965 being a pivotal moment for Black Americans being able to vote. It's actually also extends to my family. You know, my family couldn't have come here into the United States because my parents immigrated here. My dad was able to come because of an act passed in Congress post the Civil Rights Act that opened up immigration because for the longest time, immigration was completely like held back or almost banned from a lot of Asian countries like India.
Wow.
So very little immigration or immigrants that came. And after the opening up post civil rights era, and then also in the early 70s with the Reunification Act, where you could bring family members, there's now 19 million, you know, South Asians from the subcontinent. that have settled down and live and had kids here in the United States. And that could not have happened without the results of the civil rights movement pushing for the re-examining of immigration law and how racist it was at the time. So there's a lot for a lot of people to appreciate on
Yeah, there is. I mean, it almost feels like a rerun right now.
It does.
Yeah.
It does, definitely.
Yeah.
It definitely feels like, there were a lot of lessons that maybe people just didn't learn over the years.
Exactly. Exactly.
So moving on to the next image.
Okay.
Now that's gangster.
Now
Black
that's
Power,
gangster.
1998. Now the thing is, though, for me, that what's striking about this image, it looks like it was taken like yesterday. Kind of like the aesthetics of it and everything, and the message is very strong and clear. But can you please tell us about what was going on here?
I was actually just walking. It's right across the street from the Apollo Theater in New York. And this gentleman is selling posters of the atrocities. It's like people being hung, being lynched, being beat throughout history. And on his chest, there's a man kneeling with his hands on his face, as if, he's sorry for everything that's happened, or he's praying or something. But I was just walking down the street, man. I had a little Panasonic camera in my pocket, which I carry sometimes even now. And I just stooped down for 1 second and shot one frame. I usually shoot just 1 or 2 frames because as a young photographer, I'd only have 36 exposures, maybe a couple of rolls of film in my pocket, even when I was working for the newspaper. So every picture I take basically has to count. And it's always been very important to me that within that frame is the narrative. There's always a story being told, and hopefully it's clear and able to transcend that moment. And I appreciate what you said about it feeling like the present, and there's a timeless quality to a lot of these pictures.
And the black and white helps that.
Yeah,
you can't tell the difference in color, right? Because
no.
sometimes you can tell, like if this was in color, I could be like, oh, that's a digital low megapixel camera, right away. But with black and white, it's not the same feeling.
Yeah, not only that, but I love black and white because we cut straight to the narrative. There's nothing in the way of telling the story. I mean, it's not that I don't like color photography, but for me, black and white photography takes us straight to the intention,
Yeah, absolutely.
This is
1968.
Yeah, Blackstone Rangers. And that's C.T. Vivian. He just died a few days before John Lewis died. He's a reverend, very interesting man. The Blackstone Rangers was a gang that terrorized the south side of Chicago. And what they're doing in this photograph is they're having a press conference because they're trying to present a new image to the public. And that new image is they're going to become a religious organization called the El Rukins. But shortly after that, the leader of the Rangers got busted for a second time because he was trying to make a deal about a grenade launcher with Gaddafi, and his phone was being tapped. So this didn't last long.
Wait, he was going to make a deal like we talked about in Back to the Future?
Making a deal. And
wow.
I like to look at this picture as the Last Supper.
Uh-huh. Interesting. And then Democratic Convention, and this was a very interesting convention. There was a lot of violence, kind of the same type of protests with police action that we're seeing today.
Exactly.
At this convention.
This was a anti-war protest that was happening. And that night,
the Roosevelt Hotel.
It's across the street from the Roosevelt Hotel, and this is in Grant Park.
Yep.
And all these people were tear gassed and beaten by police that night. It was a pretty violent scene. But I was working for the newspaper at that time, 1968. This is fairly recent.
Yeah, 2019, very recent.
Yeah. And actually, it's just amazing that this little girl lifts her sign up and shows it to me. Nobody else is looking. Right. It's just like she said, here, mister, look at this, you know. That's the other thing about photography for me. I feel like the subject matter that I choose to photograph, and I had a certain kind of destiny to share because we're at the right time, at the right moment, that convergence happens, that we're able to like be there. And I'm there to press that shutter. I'm there to see it. And then it lives that we can share it. And this message is so important. Fight like a girl.
And this was a protest. Was it involving the Me Too movement?
No, no, no. That's the women's march
Oh, the women's
downtown.
march.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Excellent. All right, Fidel Castro.
Fidel Castro. I was down in Cuba making a documentary at a Peace and Freedom Festival. It was 1973. You couldn't go to Cuba then. We went through Montreal to get to Havana. And we were shooting outside, just some cinema verite stuff. And a couple of guys walk up to us and they say, our cameraman is late. Is it possible that you guys could come in and shoot an interview for us? And we said, yeah. So they took our ID and ran it through security, which didn't take any time at all for them to come back and tell me where I lived in Chicago and what kind of work my mother and father did. And that was without the computers, right? And we go in there and we shoot an interview with Philip Agee, who was a CIA defector. And as we were about to leave, the guy said, hey, would you guys like to go someplace with us? We said, yeah. So we hopped in a Jeep and pulled out from the back of this building, and a Jeep pulls in front of us, and Fidel is in it. And we get there, he signs a peso and gives it to me. And that's shot with a 50 millimeter lens. So I'm not that far away from him. And I have a few photographs of him, but this is my favorite.
Interesting. Then 2016, around the time of the election.
Yeah, nobody listened to my picture. Yeah, that's 2016. That's a protest that was happening downtown, and I just, I took a couple of photographs that day. And
yeah, that guy can climb, that's for sure.
Pretty much speaks for itself, right?
Yeah. Yes, it does. The federal public defender. So this is a really interesting phenomenon that we're seeing a lot more in SoCal right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, John.
This is it definitely fits into the vision of protest and being able to see with that kind of eye. And the other thing that's interesting is I was talking about how the subject and I are supposed to cross paths. This particular evening down in Little Tokyo, I think I'd gone around the block 4 times looking for a parking space. And as soon as I parked my car, this was out my window. And I got out the car and there it was. There was no way that picture wasn't supposed to be taken and shared with everyone. But isn't that something? Federal public defender, okay.
It is, and this is like a master class in framing, like seeing all of this at once. It has a lot of meaning to it. First of all, of course, you have the federal public defender, and then the irony of someone that will never get the benefit of that defense, right?
Exactly.
And you also have this idea of resources, with the water, for the fire hoses.
Yeah, exactly.
Are those resources getting to the people that need it? So
right.
It's this kind of photograph.
A shopping cart that's never used for shopping.
Shopping cart that's never used for shopping. The electrical outlet that will never be used for electricity by this person.
Right.
All this, says so much. And when you were talking earlier about capturing the whole story in that frame, this is it. This is an image that really speaks to that, of how you can get so much information and tell so much of a story with just an image. Yeah, sometimes, exactly. When you first look at this image, like, honestly, I think the reaction is subconscious. Like, you get it subconsciously before you even consciously figure out what other pieces.
I agree with you. Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Absolutely.
So good stuff.
This was
favorite topic, Nazis.
This was this was
Do we have
a
enough movies about these guys yet?
what you say? I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
I said, do we have enough movies about these guys yet, or what?
Yeah, right, exactly. So this was in front of City Hall. It was Hitler's birthday, and a white supremacist group were, I guess they were about to throw a party for him, but they were on the steps of the City Hall, and you couldn't get close to them. I rode a subway down there that day because I thought it'd be kind of hard to get through. And I tell you, man, I go down there, get off the subway, I shoot a couple of pictures, not many at all. And I took this picture and I felt like it was enough to tell the story. You know, the comparing Martin Luther King to what this guy's carrying, the sign. And that was the complete narrative of that event, you know, especially because I couldn't see the white supremacists. Nobody there could actually see them. But yeah, it does the same thing. It captures that narrative.
Yeah, it's almost, you know, not important to even see who the white supremacists are that are
No, no.
much more important to see this, the response. Very cool. I love this frame because it's really beautiful. The fan, it's a gorgeous piece of art that's being used on that fan, but I like how that's in focus and the background is not. Like, how did you get it to line up like that? Did you have her hold it a certain way, or did you just catch her doing
I
it?
never ask anybody if I can take their picture.
You don't? Okay.
No, everything you see is always candid. You know, even if someone's looking at me, it's just that moment. I was at a religious event, and I didn't call it an event, you call it a service, I guess. And everybody's sitting on the grass outside. The sun is in everyone's face, and I turn around, and she's waiting for a little offering, you know, like something that somebody's going to hand her, right? And I turn around, and at that moment, she just leans back and puts that fan in front of her face. And it just fits so perfectly and says so much with the fist up in the air and the American flag, you know, and it's definitely makes its own statement.
Yeah. Very cool.
You should see that picture when it's like 4 feet long. It's a big print of that is amazing. Now I did one that was like, I guess 36 by something. It's powerful on the wall. This next picture, unfortunately, could be taken today and other names could be added. As we see there, we have Dred Scott, Emmett Till, Trayvon Martin, and the police in the background. It pretty much, once again, speaks for itself.
What are your thoughts on how things are now in terms of the response from, you know, everyone to the protest? Do you think there's coming?
You know, I'll tell you something. George Floyd got killed over $20.
Yeah.
And when it happened, he was calling for his mother. And what's interesting is that we were trapped by a pandemic, and everybody all over the world were locked in their houses with computer screens. That had never happened before. A lot of people black people have been killed by the police, but we weren't forced to watch them. As many body cam clips come along and the news moves so fast that what happens today is gone in 15 minutes by another article. But in this case, we were forced to watch that man kill George Floyd over and over again. And because of that, he didn't die in vain. And because of that, we have to reassess. We have to reassess who we are. Our voices have to be heard. It's unavoidable at this point that things have not been fair and they've never been fair, and that there's been a tradition of this kind of behavior. And speaking of India, Patel, there were 2 men that were taken to a police station because they missed the curfew, and they were killed in the police station. And there was a protest. It was in Mumbai not that long ago. And the people were shouting, "We will not be George Floyd." So that voice has been heard all over the world. And it's speaking to all of us at this point, like it never spoke to us before. And hopefully from that experience, things will truly change because there's no longer the need to be politically correct. There's no longer the need to hold our tongue, and you can see that just by the divisiveness in this country. Everybody is speaking up and things are changing and changing fast. And we'll see what that means in the near future.
Absolutely. So going back to 1968, United and Parish in Chicago.
Yeah.
I think a common thing that people talk about all the time is like, how come these communities that are most affected by, the violence caused by drugs or whatnot, are the ones, or police action, or why aren't they protesting? And we know that that's not true, that they're always protesting all the time, all year round, actually.
Yeah, everybody's been protesting for a long time, man. America
Mhm.
is not the black man's battleground. I mean, America is the black man's battleground, not Vietnam, right? That's what that sign says that this young girl is carrying. And, I have to tell you, when you talk about protest,
Mhm.
uh, it's we've been protesting a very long time.
That's right.
I realized the other day I was doing one of my collages. I think you have some collages in here that I paint. And I was looking at a picture of Harriet Tubman. And I realized that my father was 17 years old when Harriet Tubman died. That puts me one generation away from slavery.
That's right.
It wasn't that long ago. So there are attitudes in America that have been shaped by that experience and affected by that experience. We as a people have been affected by that experience, all of us. This is that man being stabbed with the flag is an attorney. That's a famous photograph. Uh, and he's trying to walk into the courthouse in Boston. And that's Martin Luther King on the bottom. And this painting was about a transportation strike that was about to happen.
Hmm.
So it was 1978, I put that collage together.
And then here's a more recent one from 2020.
Yeah, and that's the one where Harriet Tubman is over there on the right with those white clothes on. And those were slaves that she led to freedom. And there's a man on the left, he's being lynched. And this man is walking tall in spite of all of that, like so many people have to do against this system that we've been subjected to. We have to walk in spite of it. And this is the piece that made me think about my father. He was 20 years older than my mother. He was born in 1902. And he was 17 years old when that lady in the white died, which means those people, he could have met those people right there. Those freed slaves, he could have met those people.
In his teenage years.
Right, exactly. This picture, oh, man, this picture's sad. All my collages unfortunately, they get to be real political, but this is called 28 inches. And that's the space that a slave had to sleep underneath the bows of the boat, within the bows of the boat, 28 inches. And it's the story of America not being built at ground level, but starting at 28 inches, And there's a Confederate soldier and a Union soldier. And there's a little slave boy at their feet. And those are the bodies from the slave ships along the bottom. And that's what that story is about. This one is about Ahmaud, the jogger who was killed, Ahmaud Arbery, who was killed jogging. This is his story.
And it's so sad to think in 2020, it took an outcry from the public to arrest the people that were responsible for
Well,
this
not only that, but it took George Floyd
Yes,
to
dying.
make this case come to the mouths of people, just like Breonna.
And there was such a cover up from every official involved in this case.
Right. This was George Floyd made this something to talk about, And it just blows my mind, man, how things happen. Like you look at a cat like George Floyd, whose name is being uttered by the people in his neighborhood, by his mother. He lives his life, and then his life is taken. And his whole purpose of living, it seems, was to change the world, was to definitely have an effect upon everything. It's really something.
It's interesting because this collage, you know, it brings out so much emotions. And I think what's different about collages from photography is now you take the aspects of photography where you like capture a lot in a frame and then kind of explode it times 10 with a collage, because now you can put so much more meaning with lots of 2D images all at once. So there's a lot to take in. So you have this planet, this world that you've created literally in this
Yeah.
white space. And the world that you see is about this story. I like the juxtaposition of, you know, the characters, you know, the old black and white photos with the more modern, and then also the double image of the truck, which to me seems a lot like your motion work, right? This is like your cinematography coming through. You're making the truck look like it's moving
Exactly.
by doing these tricks, and then
That's
outside
funny.
of the world that is created is the whispers that cause it, right? Like with the KKK and slavery, which is represented on the left.
Yeah.
You know,
And that
which
little boy walking away from the cops right there, see
yeah.
next to the plan? That was a picture I took in 1968 in the park.
Mm,
And that cop was about to stop that little boy.
yeah,
But
amazing.
yeah,
stuff.
it gives me a chance to like stretch out. There's no boundaries, you know?
Mhm. So
That's
this
it.
was what the setup that you sorry the exhibition you had, the Museum of African Art in Los Angeles, which ended earlier this year, right before kind of everyone went home for the pandemic. But you will be at the Getty Museum with a few of these images, and just so people can see the photography images. Of course, it's way better when you see it in print, because you know it's the paper that Johnny chooses, the size, the style of the framing, all that comes together. And I encourage people to look up online with the Getty. You can look up the African American Museum as well to see some more stories. And then, you know, stay tuned because there'll be more shows coming up in the future.
Yeah, that Getty thing probably won't happen until December. They want it to be an actual exhibit that people can go into the museum to see. So we're not sure when that's going to happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, Johnny, going from this like photography, and then you went to cinematography. I want you
Yeah.
to talk about like when you first started in the industry, what are some of the hurdles that you had to overcome? Because then let's talk about mentorship after that, like how you know kept going, because you did face like you know discrimination and things like that when you first started here in LA, and things have changed maybe over the years. But you know, what can someone do to help themselves if that happens to them?
Well, I'll tell you, my first experience was my welcome to LA was Carlton Moss, my mentor, got me a job working for Cal and Roz Bernstein at a company called Dove Films that was owned once by Haskell Wexler and Cal, and later on by Vilmos Zsigmond and the Bernsteins. And those guys were the people, while I was in undergraduate school, sent me a 16 millimeter Airflex and film so I could mess it up while I was in undergraduate school. And when I came out to LA, I finally got a chance to meet them, and they were wonderful people and very, very politically conscious people. Carlton Moss, my mentor, was blacklisted during the McCarthy era. And later on, the Red Scare, once again. And the Bernsteins hid Carlton and his wife in their attic as they prepared to surrender to the House of Un-American Activities. And
Wow.
they also would do things like not have any grapes on the set when Cesar Chavez and the farm workers were protesting. And they were just those kinds of people. And my very first day on the job as a PA, I walk onto the grip truck and through the side steps, and there's the grip box. And on that grip box is the most derogatory cartoons you could ever imagine. There was Martin Luther King in a diaper drinking a bottle of ink, and there he is in a watermelon patch with some kind of ignorant shit written underneath the cartoon. There's Cesar Chavez crawling underneath the fence, and you know, some Asian people being called gooks, some Vietnam type jokes. It was horrible. So I get on the phone I go back in the office and I say, Carlton, I think there's been a mistake, man. I said, this place is not that cool. What is it, Simmons? And I tell him the story. He says, do you know any black people making movies right now? I said, no, I really don't. He said, okay, you want to be a cinematographer? I said, yeah, that's important to me. And he hangs up the phone. And I spent 2 years with these people. And I had to listen to every kind of joke in the world. And it was horrible. And at the same time, extremely educational. There's a man named Jerry Posner that eventually began to owned Hollywood Rentals. And Jerry, he's a Jewish guy. He would always sit on an apple box and never participate in the jokes. And he would just stare at me while they were telling them. And I'd take my time, and later on, I'd ask somebody what this was and that was. And Johnny, just 1 second, man, I got to tell this joke. No offense to you, but I just got to tell this. It was a Chinaman, a black man, and so-and-so, right? And I'd have to sit there and, oh my God, here we go again, right? But 20 years later, I have a show at Warner Brothers, and my name is on the wall, John Simmons, Director of Photography, where you park your car. And as I park my car, there's a dude standing in my space, and I turn around, and it's Jerry Posner. And he says, Johnny, I knew you'd be okay, because you sat there and you listened to all that stuff, and you would ask questions in spite of it. And I have to tell you, I learned a lot from those people. It was a tough lesson, but I got a lot out of it. It was Vilmo Zsigmon's crew is who it was, basically. And what I have to tell any artist is that your passion has to be greater than the obstacles that you face. And they have to be greater in the sense that you don't even see those obstacles. All you see is what it is you're heading towards. And we have to do that as artists and creators. We have to do that. And we still have to do that because the struggle continues. This industry was created. I mean, we can look at Birth of a Nation. You know, I mean, what the stories that were being told, how we were being looked at as a people, there was no place for us to fit into the industry. You know, it wasn't that we were welcomed. It was like, I was about to do a job one time and the cat told me, you can't have that feature. I never seen a black man behind a camera and the universal lot, and I'm not going to be the first guy to put him there. And, you know, I'd have jobs where I was shooting a movie in North Carolina called Once Upon a Time When We Were Colored. Every black actor in the world is in that movie. And I had to do a really big scene one day. And I had 4 or 5 cameras. And it was the Ku Klux Klan March. Tim Reed directed the picture. That's the picture where the ladies are on the couch. That's part of that. And I walk up to my camera and a guy comes up to me and tells me to get off the camera. He's a camera assistant that's been hired for the day from somewhere. And somebody has to tell him, well, that's who you're working for today. Now, I could repeat that story about 3 times, but I won't take up our time because it's happened more than once in my trajectory of work. But even today, man, it's so important that we continually take a position of bringing people forward. You know, I mean, the Women in Media has done a very good job at bringing women forward, and pretty much they're being accepted as the norm now. But the struggle continues in pretty much just the same way for people of color. You know, the optics are very powerful. I mean, thank God Bradford Young was nominated for an Academy Award because there's a whole group of people that can see a black cinematographer. Yep. There's a whole group of people that can see a woman cinematographer because of Rachel, right?
Yeah.
But that's like looking at a black president, you know, it doesn't change things, you know, it's like the optics still, we're being conditioned by them. I mean, even now, if people have an image of a corporate head they're not going to think of you. They're not going to think of a woman. They're going to see a white dude in a suit. That's what the image that comes to their head, you know. When they think of a bad guy, who do they see? You know, some danger in the street. Those are all optics that have to be addressed. And through the power of storytelling, we can influence and change those things. The thing that happens now with storytelling is everything comes and goes so quickly. Before, I don't know about you, but for me, there's a soundtrack that is a soundtrack of my life. It's Motown music. There's a visual soundtrack. There's a visual track as well. Pictures that have influenced and shaped me, from 125th Street to Superfly. Superfly changed how people dressed in Harlem forever.
For
you
years.
know what I mean? For years. You know, they even had hats with Superfly hair attached to them.
Oh, yeah, I know.
You know, it's a very powerful medium that we're working in. And, you know, and I'm so glad that independent film has been able to change that. And a lot of that has been made possible through the advent of digital cinema. It's democratized the industry. It's made it more acceptable. I mean, not acceptable. It's put it in reach of everybody. You know, you could tell a story.
Definitely made it more accessible for people to be able to tell their stories. But I think let's talk about the high end, right? Because, you know, we're getting questions in from people now. And I have a question here from Hafa Ocasta. Sorry, Ocasta. I didn't mean to butcher your name. But basically saying, with the recent racial protests rocking the country, can you speak to your experience as a Black man working in the industry dealing with discrimination, which you did? What's your advice to young cinematographers on how to navigate the industry today if facing discrimination? Because I don't think now you need to ignore, you know, if someone's making jokes and stuff like that that make you uncomfortable. I don't think it's necessary to do that. So what would your advice be to someone that's facing discrimination today, 2020?
Well, exactly. I feel like right now we can no longer be politically correct. We don't have to be silent and take it. I mean, at those days, I mean, there weren't any Black people around. I didn't have anybody. There was Joseph Wilcox, Joseph Calloway, oh my God, Chuck Mills, cinematographers. Those cats were like unicorns to me. I didn't know they really existed. I didn't know where they were. You know, they were like cats that I admired, but did somebody make these dudes up? I don't get to see them, you know? Right. But now, what the gentleman that's asking the question, he has people that he can look at, that he can navigate his career towards and know that this thing is not impossible. The problem with it is that when you work as a cinematographer, you work pretty much alone, you know? There aren't other people there. The other thing too is that protests don't reach the motion picture industry. We can't all get together and go stand in front of Paramount, you know, or stand in front of CAA. That's not going to happen, you know? So the thing that has to happen is that we do have, now this is changing subjects because this is getting towards mentoring, but mentoring doesn't always apply to everything. And the reason why is because there are cats out here and women out here who are very talented and have been involved in independent storytelling and worked as cinematographers and grips and electricians independently that are ready to move into the motion picture industry as professionals, you know? So how do we navigate that? And the SOC and the ICG and the ASC are trying to put something together to help that out. But to answer my friend's question, it goes back to exactly what I said. Your passion for what you do has to be greater than the obstacles that you face. And the thing that's good right now is that there's so many organizations that are moving things in that direction. There's SPORIS, which is about Black people in the industry, cinematographers and other disciplines, gaffers and key grips. There's also the national, the National People of Color in Cinematography, which is out of Atlanta. Alfeo Dixon runs it. And then there's something called Who You Know, HUE, you know. So those things didn't exist when I was trying to do this. But now there's a community. There's a community that people like my man can reach out to and know that there's someone that can help you navigate. There are compasses out here that point you in a direction, or at least let you know that you're not on this path by yourself, you know. And, you know, if he doesn't know about those, you know, we can give people my email address. They can certainly reach out to me.
Absolutely. And let's talk about a specific program that you're involved with the ASC. The ASC, of course, is the American Society of Cinematography. You're a member. I'm an associate member myself, so I get to go to a lot of the events and stuff. But you and I both know that it hasn't in the past been a very diverse organization. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we don't yet reach out to young people when they're younger and, you know, not quite professionals yet, and encourage them and give them the tools that they can use to become the professional, which then can, you know, come into the organization later on.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. A lot of people are very misunderstood about how you get to be an ASC member, how that happens, you know. And it's an invitational only society, right? And it's based on your body of work. And it requires 3 letters from different members to invite you into the organization. And you have a membership meeting, and they look at your reel and they listen to your conversation about your work and ask you questions. And then that reel goes out to more than 300 members. And they don't know what color you are. All they get to see is what the work is. Now, the problem with that is that I know a lot of really bomb cinematographers, women and men, that have not had the opportunity to gather a body of work because of systemic racism that this industry is all about, you know, and it's still about that, right? There's companies that are really trying hard to not let that be the way it is. Netflix is pretty amazing in that regard. But here's the thing, is if people are given the opportunity to shoot stuff and to hone their craft, then they're able to present it to people.
Yeah.
And they're able to become a member of the ASC or whatever. But that's the problem. The problem is not that the ASC is not diverse because of the ASC. That's their society is set up, as I told you.
It's a reflection of the industry itself.
It's totally, thank you. It's a reflection of the industry itself.
And so that means that if they want to make the change, the ASC has to be one of the organizations that actually helps to make that change happen.
And we're trying to do it through the Vision Committee. The Vision Committee is about helping people navigate their careers. And we have mentorship programs as well as master classes with scholarships. This year, we got over 256 applications for mentoring. Patty Lee ASC and Todd ZEISS ASC are the members that handle that mentorship committee. Cynthia Pusak is my co-chairman, along with Polly Morgan and Fernando Arguelles, all ASC members. And we work very hard at trying to create events that let people know that we're there. You know, we've had an event called Crane Day that Women in Media put together with Cynthia. And Crane Day was out at, what's the name of it?
Was it J.L. Fisher? No, it was
Cine Moves.
Cine Moves, that's right.
Cine Moves. And it was made up of like lots of people. It's lots of people, you know, 100 people. Did you come out there that day?
No, I got the lowdown. I saw the write-ups and the photographs, and then a few people that were there actually told me about it.
Right, and we did another one called Day of Inspiration. We did one here and one in New York that was about women in the industry. And that was a pretty powerful event. We also did one called Changing the Face of the Industry, which a lot of people came and spoke with. A lot of cinematographers were there. We had a turnout of about maybe 150 people. And we just recently did one that Cynthia put together with Panavision called Framing the Future. And it was just about a week before the pandemic hit. But so we're doing everything I can to move this thing forward. And now we're coming together with the ICG and SOC to actually try to make a difference and move some things forward. And everybody should stay in touch with the website on the ASC because all kinds of events are coming up in the future. Mentoring is something that has to be important to all of us. And it's something for me that's very easy to do. And actually, it's a misused term because what we love shapes our reality. And my reality has been shaped by art, photography, and cinematography. So I meet somebody and we bond on this shared reality.
Yeah.
And it's easy to share that reality. And I walk away with the most wonderful feeling in my heart, and they walk away feeling like they just met a mentor. I didn't know that they met a mentor because I got something from the event myself, you know? And
I mean, that's the kind of relationship to have where it's a two-way street. It's not about just, getting information or getting access, but having that relationship, because this industry is just about that. And the issue is that some people don't get put into the situations where they could form the relationship. And you're
exactly.
helping them put them in a situation where you could form a relationship, have somebody there to contact, call for help, or look to for inspiration, whatever it may be.
It could be anything. It could be it could be technical.
Let's talk about that because you're a teacher. I have a comment here from Joe Doherty, who thanks you for the copy of film lighting that you gave him when he was a young PA in Hollywood. ADing a couple of videos with you in the 90s.
Oh my God, this is your life. You remember that TV show?
I'm so happy Joe brought this up because this is not the first time I've heard this. I've heard it from a number of students that you've had, like, oh, that's the first time I got this book, or it's the first time I got this reference, or the first time I met him, he gave me this. I think you're open with anyone that approaches you. And I think this is a quality of a good mentor, is that it doesn't matter what level they are or who they are. You basically say, no, I want to encourage you to tell your story. And I think that's important.
Well, here's what's important, man, is it's not even about mentoring. It's about just moving this whole society forward, to be able to be a kind of influence that navigates people towards what their passion is, to be able to change the situation as much as you can. It's like you just have to have an open heart with everybody. I mean, I saw a funny T-shirt the other day that said, treating people equally doesn't mean you're going to get less of the pie.
And that's just it, like, it's so good that you talked about that because, we have these informal conversations with the ASC every Monday now during the stay at home phase of the pandemic. It kind of got started. And I think I even said that a couple of times, like having programs like this with mentorship and coveting diversity and reaching out to people that traditionally might not be in your circle has nothing to do with saying that there's something wrong with the membership right now. Every single member that got in because of their merit. But there are other people out there that have just as much merit that weren't considered. And those are the people we want to add to the table. And everyone gets that pie. It's not that this pie will get smaller for you.
No, it doesn't. Exactly.
It does not do that because the society is only as strong as its membership. And right now, there's, the society only represents a small percentage of the professionals actually in the industry.
Exactly. But you know what? We're hoping that those things will change through the mentoring, through the master classes, just being more open. When I was in film school, the ASC may as well have been a Masonic temple. You didn't know what they did behind those walls. What they could have been dancing on one foot. Who knew what they were doing? You know what I mean?
Public now, it's different.
Yeah, but now there's an open door, and there's all kinds of organizations that open doors to people. I mean, before the pandemic, I was able, ever since I've been shooting, I've always made a deal with the producers that I'm able to bring students from my class to the set. And I was doing that all the way up until the night of the pandemic when they shut us down. And that has me very much concerned right now because I just did that pilot that Kevin Hart produced. And that would have been a situation where I would have taken somebody from the beginning all the way through color correction. Now I'm not able to do that. I don't know how this new thing is going to affect the whole idea of mentoring, to be able to have hands-on experience, to be able to come to my set and operate a camera and talk to the camera operators and go and sit in the dimmer room with the dimmer board operator and let him show you some magic, right? I mean, how am I going to do that? It's really got me concerned.
It's a big deal because if you think about it, like, you know, in the commercial shoot, if the client's not even coming to set anymore and they want a remote feed, there's no way that they're going to let you hire, you know, a PA that's inexperienced. It's just not going to.
Exactly. I mean, this show that I just did, everything was streamed to the networks. There were no network executives
No people there. Yeah, exactly.
No,
They
even
want
for
the least amount of people on set as possible.
yeah, even for the rehearsals, we had to stream them, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So everything's changing. We'll see where this thing is going to go.
Let's turn to a few more questions. Okay. Here's a good one. So, you know, we of course did a very serious topic, and I think I think a lot of people got a lot out of it, which is great. But here's something nice. What was your favorite experience on set ever?
Well, see, that's difficult because I can't tell you how much I love being on sets. You know, I mean, the worst day on a set is better than any day anyplace else. I'm not kidding. You learn how not to do things. You learn how to do things. Sure. I can't really remember what my favorite experience was. I mean, I used to love making music videos because they were so experimental. And I loved it too because you were only shooting for like 6 seconds of something good, you know? So you could try a lot of things. You could try all kinds of experiments with tilt shift lenses, you know, ramping. Remember, we used to have to ramp in the camera, right? Right, right, and dimming a 20K down all the way.
You'd have to count right on your hand. You'd be like 1, 2, 3. Okay,
right, exactly, right. So all that was, you know, so much fun, and even today, you know, the show that I work on, Family Reunion, those people just give everybody there the respect of what it is that they do. If it's a set dresser, they listen to them. If it's like a cinematographer, you know, they believe in you for being there. And it's just, the show I'm working on is just a very cool environment to be in right now. Hopefully it'll come back. You know, I can't say what my favorite one is. I did a music video yesterday. My niece flew in from New York, and the music video must have a budget of $12. And it was it was so much fun, you know, to try and make it feel like something. And every day is a good day on set.
Very nice. An anonymous fan says or asks, are there other ways to cut right to the story in non-documentary cinematography? Because earlier you mentioned that what was nice about documentaries that you cut right to the story. You know, you got it as it is. But what kind of techniques can you use in fiction to do the same thing?
Well, fiction is a collaboration between the writer and the director, and then the cinematographer and the director, you know? So I think when you talk about cutting to the chase in a story, in a narrative story, that is a result of that collaboration. What I can do as a cinematographer is not the question, it's what the collaboration wants to see happen.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think that's the only way I can answer that.
Have your work service the story. That's the way.
That's what it is. I mean, the story comes first, you know?
Story comes first.
It's always the story.
Yep. There's a couple of questions about the difference between, you know, your documentary work and your cinematography work on set. Like, what's the main difference for you for documentary DP, being a documentary DP or being a scripted DP?
You mean my documentaries as film documentaries that I've made?
I think that's what they mean is like, what's the biggest difference between when you shot a doc or when you shot a scripted show? And we got this question from an anonymous fan and from Ethan Oser as well. So we have a couple
I know Ethan. Well, you know, here it is. Documentaries. Well, there's a lot of different kinds of documentaries. You know, there's documentaries that involve interviews and reenactments. And there's documentaries that you want to approach an undisturbed environment. You want to be a fly on the wall to be able to tell the truth, you know? So there's always that, you know, and as a documentarian, you want to be able to do those cutaways that are significant. You want to be able to once again expand that envelope. You want to be able to not disturb that environment. You want to be able to back off a little bit. That's another thing that happened when videotape came along. Is I used to make a lot of documentaries with a 10-minute roll of film, you know, and a slate. And that was a little bit difficult to not disturb the environment. But as soon as video came along, you were able to take that position. Debbie Allen and I did a series called Cool Women, and we did them with those little Canon cameras, right? When they first came out, the white ones, right? And we went all over the world. And it was a wonderful experience because we were actually able to be with people long enough to disappear into a woman's house in Poland that accepted orphans off the street and, you know, that kind of thing. But what's the question? I got lost.
No, they want to know the big difference between, but you know, it's interesting. That's just it. There's not necessarily a stark or easy way to tell the difference between a doc film and a fiction, because, you know, doc is essentially fiction in its way too. So you do manipulative stuff that you would do in a scripted show. But I think people just want to know, like, overall, what's the difference in style between the two?
Well, I mean, when you're doing a documentary, the environment is basically controlling you. When you're doing a narrative piece, you're controlling that environment. And a lot of times you're creating that environment, you know? And I think that pretty much is the basic story. I mean, the basic comparison. You can control the light in a narrative piece. You can have a selection of lenses and camera moves that work. In documentaries, you don't get to do that. You get what's there. Shauna Hagan, who is an incredible documentarian, cinematographer, her documentaries look like they're narrative. There's so many good documentary cinematographers. I wouldn't think of myself as being one, but I've seen a lot, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's look at, well, this is an interesting question. What are your differences between your approach to still photography and cinematography? Because we showed both.
I'll tell you, they don't have a lot in common. The only thing they pretty much have in common is the medium of capture and the idea of a frame. Because as a still photographer, I go out there by myself and I tell the story with one frame. You know, that what blew my mind the other day was I got that negative scan of those girls carrying the sign that say unite or perish. And on that strip of negative, that's the only picture of those girls. There's not like 2 or 3 pictures. That was the only frame that I shot, right? That told a story. When you're doing cinematography, the composition is continuous. It also has to consider the idea of montage. But above all that is you're being motivated by the story. Whatever the story is, that's the motivation for everything you put the camera on. What are we pushing forward? What story are we telling here? Where is it moving? And along with that, I got a key grip with a bunch of people with him. I got a gaffer with a bunch of people with him. I got a focus puller looking at the operator saying, "Was that all right?" Right? I mean, there's a lot going on, you know. But so the two don't really compare for me. There was a whole period, that whole music video period that I told you about. I was like completely absorbed in that. I mean, I loved it. I don't have hardly one still photograph from that period. I didn't take
conducting
pictures.
so much other stuff, and I
I
think
was
that's the
like,
difference between,
I
like,
was just like only in love with that. I was only in love with the idea of camera movements and light and getting this done. You know, I just have periods like that. And not only that, but I could go to a set to shoot a TV show and have the production meetings, the meetings with the art director. Everything is well planned. I can see it. this is something interesting for me, is that I have periods where I can't see still pictures well. You know, I don't, my eye is not sharp. You know, I don't get to, I don't see my story as clearly, you know. And I'm talking about in the everyday. Like I got a few protest photographs from this whole George Floyd event that has been taking place, but it was an event to photograph. But for the kind of pictures that I love to take, which are about people and just their everyday living, I have to click into a mindset that makes me see that thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because it's
I
much
don't
more
know.
tell in one frame than it is a series of frames.
Yeah, and you kind of do it intuitively. You don't do it thinking. You pick it up and you do it.
Really cool. I think for me, it seems like you're describing the difference between an orchestral conductor, a cinematographer, versus someone playing an instrument. You know,
There you go. That's really good. That's a that's perfect. Right. A conductor or a guy in the subway station. Right.
and like slamming that, you know, stack, like really
Right.
playing the crap out of it. Put it all on
Exactly.
his own, you know, so
Exactly.
good, but there's more money in his skill than
Exactly.
playing the orchestra.
That's funny, so that's good. I like that.
Well, you know, I always enjoy chatting with you. It seems like we've gotten through all the questions that were there, unless there are more to come. But you know, I want to give you this opportunity, Johnny, to sum up. You know, what are some of your thoughts for the young people out there if they're just getting into cinematography right now? What are your suggestions as an educator, as a professional, of what they should do?
I think that one of the things they have to do is they have to study. They have to study everything because cinematography encompasses everything. It encompasses music. It encompasses drama. It encompasses life in general. You have to be able, the thing that's so important is to be able to love life and accept life because that's what gives you a point of view. You need to be able to have a point of view and you need to be able to study points of view. I mean, that's the stuff that makes you grow. That's the food that you need to eat. And I think that that's something that we never stop eating. I mean, all of us, I mean, anyone, any cinematographer, any artist, what I always like to say is that there's no arrival. We're continually at a state of becoming. You know, we're continually on this road to something. I don't know exactly what, but there's this unknown destination. And on the way there, we have to study everything because that's what cinematography is about. And what they're so fortunate to do is they're able to have this medium, this technology. I was with a young lady at that the Panavision event that I told you about. It was lunchtime. She sat down with me and showed me a clip that she shot. It looked beautiful. It was a story of a girl, you know, some little drama with this girl. I said, so what did you shoot that with? She said, that's my iPhone, right? And she told a story.
Yeah.
She told a story and she shaped the light in a bathroom, put a piece of black wrap on the light in the bathroom so it wouldn't go everywhere, and told a story. The thing that we can do now is we can exercise our craft. You know, I used to always admire musicians because they could just like stick a sock in a saxophone and play that bad boy at 3 o'clock in the morning and not disturb the neighbors all by themselves and walk around with a song in their head. And I have cats, I'd say, damn, this dude, man, he's got so much music in his head that he plays when he wants to play it. It's like getting to be like that with us in terms of cinematography. I carry a little camera around. It's a little Sony camera, A6300. It's a little 4K camera, right? Yeah. It's like you can make a short film with it.
Oh, you
I used my iPhone on a Netflix scene before we got wrapped up. I mean, this technology, there's no stopping us now. We can tell our story. And especially with the internet and YouTube, we can share our story. And it's so important. I think it's so wonderful that we're able to do that now. You know, that there's nothing that stops us now in terms of telling our story. The little girl that shot the George Floyd thing, that was just one cell phone out there. That one, you know?
That's powerful.
That's
That's how
powerful.
powerful it is. Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely. All walking around with little,
well,
high-end, high-resolution cameras in our pockets all the
that's
time.
right. That's exactly right. There's like so many photographs that exist in the world where there was the only person there to take the picture. You know, that picture, famous picture of Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton. All the digital photographers just erased that file because they didn't know who Monica was. There was one guy there that was shooting film. He had it. That's the only picture, right? You know, so it's just really interesting.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. I think it's a good point to wrap up our conversation here, Johnny. It's really been a pleasure as always because you're so wonderful to chat with. I always learn a lot.
I really enjoy this. I tell you, man, you call me up to do these things, and I wonder if I have anything to say at all that is of any importance. And then we start talking, and everything we talk about is so important.
It really is, man.
It is. It's good. I enjoy it so much. Thank you for asking me to do it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I want to thank again Sight, Sound, and Story. The organization that these guys work for on the editing side.
Oh, thank you so much.
They do. Honestly, you have to see what they do in New York. It's really cool. They do online lessons. They do in-person lessons. They teach people how to edit, from start to soup to nuts. It's really great. The fact that they do this talk that we're doing with cinematography and editing professionals, I think it's great access for a lot of people to get free education. So
yeah, it's incredible. Thanks a lot, fellas. And thank you, Michael, for once again reaching out to me. I sent you something in the mail the other day. I hope you got it. But yeah, looking forward to our next conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone out there.
Hey, guys, before you go, don't sign off just yet. I wanted to thank you personally. I've been watching the whole time. You guys made it very easy for me, and actually incredibly pleasant. It was an amazing conversation. So to borrow a phrase from you, John, I want to thank you guys for opening your hearts and moving it forward with us tonight. I don't get to see all the questions because that doesn't cycle through, so we probably missed a few, so I apologize. We missed some questions that viewers had, but there were some comments too that don't get thrown over to you guys that I think you should know. Just how amazing you are and how amazing your collages are, and what an intimate visit this was. You're my new inspiration. Thanks for all your sacrifices and advices. And the comments were pouring in, and we don't get to focus on those as much as the questions, but I did feel like it was worth mentioning that there were comments like that rolling in the entire time. So I can't thank you both enough. And it's just always great to take the time out to have the conversation. So
can I need to say something, otherwise I'm going to regret I didn't say it.
Yes.
In order to change the face of this industry, our cinematographers that are listening, our key grips and gaffers, who the department heads are, we have the power to change the face of the industry in terms of the crews. We have to be able to open our crews. There's a woman named Vera Myers, who I love. She represents diversity and inclusion at Netflix. And she says, diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. We have to open our crews up. And as cinematographers, we have the power to do that. As gaffers and key grips, we have the power to do that. Wardrobe, makeup, we can change the optics of this industry. And I would feel bad if I just didn't have a chance to say that. Thanks, Josh. I just had to throw that in there.
I'm glad that you did. Man, thank you very much. And thank you again, John, Snehal. I was just going to say, if you're going to stay on while I do my little, closing remarks, I wanted to invite everybody out there to put a little pin in September 16th for our next event. We're going to have producer Denise Davis and editor Daisha Broadway. They're both from a couple of shows, Insecure being one you might know. They're going to discuss the producer-editor relationship, which is again some of these things that we don't really get to explore all the time when we do Sight, Sound, and Story. We thought we would shuffle the deck a little bit, mix it up, and try to sort of push it and see what happens when we talk to different people about different aspects of the work that they do. So please, save the date. We'll have more information coming soon. Thanks again, guys. It's as you make it look easy. You really do. So, and thanks everybody for watching. Really, thanks.
Thanks for having
Yeah.
us.
Thanks,
All right.
Jason. Thanks, everybody and the team.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Till
All right.
next time.
I got into sound designing at a point when things were just developing. I was really fascinated by the idea that dialogue, effects, music were all components of the soundtrack to a film, which had never occurred to me before.
My friends and I would make little videos in our backyards, you know, imitations of Indiana Jones and Star Wars. And, you know, eventually that need to tell stories became more of a technical interest and an interest in the art.
I think what attracted me to color correction was the fact that we were like the next stage of cinematography. And the creative side was huge, trying to understand what was wrong with an image, how to balance it, trying to understand how to let the tools do what you want them to do.
To me, what's exciting is using cinema in its full potential, which is rhythm and sound design and music. Our job is to set up expectations and then deliver on them.
What gets me excited is coming up with sound ideas that do match picture, but also is not just the equivalent of what you're seeing on screen.
Where else can the technology go? What else can we do? I'm very interested in trying to mold the image and create the best look possible. And whatever tools are out there, you want to try and latch onto them.
I'm Brian Cates, and this is my course in film editing.
I'm Eric Whipp, and this is my course on color correction.
I'm Eugene Garrity, and this is my course on sound design.
Thank you.